Welcome to the Radio Free Hub City Newscap, live from the Honey Pot Acres studio in Hagerstown, Maryland. I am your host, DJ Warbuckler, and joined by me today is DJ BB. So what is the Newscap? It's a podcast format show where we talk about local and global news that matters the most to Hub City. The full recording of the show will be available through Spotify as well as X for replay. Now, unlike our regular monthly news recap, tonight's episode is an in-depth look at a single topic important to Hub City residents. Now, let's take a look at tonight's focus topic.
This is part one of a three-part series where we will look at the coronavirus pandemic, what happened in Maryland, and what happened to BB and myself.
Tonight's topic is today, March 12th, is the 4-year anniversary of the COVID lockdowns in Maryland. 4 years ago today, Governor Hogan signed an executive order closing significant parts of the state to large gatherings. And over the next several weeks, the lockdowns got progressively worse in that more restrictive, more small businesses ended up closing completely, and some of them never reopened at all. Tonight, BB and I are going to talk about our personal experiences with the lockdowns and overall our personal experiences during the entire pandemic. And, you know, I'm going to tell you right now, this is not going to be speculation about any political or medical topics. We are going to stick strictly to what actually happened, stick strictly to what was actually reported in the news, stick strictly to the data. So if you are looking for paranoid conspiracy theories, please tune in elsewhere. You will not find them here. However, if you are looking for what actually occurred during the lockdowns, what actually occurred during the pandemics, what actually occurred to myself, to BB, and others, then please stay tuned in, and you will find out a lot more about others' perspectives during that quite scary time. BB, you want to get us started a little bit?
Sure. I just want to say, from the start, I just want people to know that this episode was actually my idea because when we think back on the pandemic and the lockdowns, it seems both, at least to me, it seems so long ago and yet so recent at the same time. And I find myself starting to forget some of the things already, or I remember that they happened, but I don't. Kind of disassociated from what it actually felt like to go through. And I have noticed just on social media or just conversations with people that we, and I don't mean you and I mean we collectively, the collective we're very quick to dismiss other people's accounting of what they were going through or a thing that they went through because it doesn't match the general experience or our own personal experience, but we know that history is being written as we live, and so while these things are fading from our minds every day, I thought it would be helpful to just kind of look back and recap, because one of the things that I often find people saying when someone says that they had a bad or traumatic experience as a direct result of pandemic-related items is that nobody forced you and you had a choice. I would like to acknowledge that is true, but I thought it would be helpful to look back and just spell out what those choices really were and why people made the choices that they did, and how even though you made the best decision that you could have at the time, that it is okay to acknowledge that there were unforeseen or even foreseen negative consequences and results from that, and that we need to just communicate with each other and believe each other and respect each other's unique experiences, and not let all of that get lost to really nobody trusts the mainstream media and things like that for a reason, because we all know that they just give the most general accounting of events. And when people look back in decades or centuries even, we want there to be some record from real people that really went through it, that aren't afraid to say, I'm glad everybody else made it out, but this particular part sucked for me. So that's what we're here for. That's what we're here to do, is just kind of recap what what actually happened, not the story on paper, and discuss the choices we were presented with and the decisions that we made and why we made them and how that worked out. So let's get into it.
Yeah, no, that's very well said. And, I want to be clear here. COVID was serious. Okay. COVID was very dangerous, especially for more vulnerable groups, the immune compromised, the elderly, and it killed people. And I'm not going to discount that. I'm not going to say that that's not factual. It absolutely killed people, and it's unfortunate that it seems that a lot of the choices that were made in power are now coming under scrutiny, in that the data is showing that they weren't necessarily the right choice to begin with. Lockdowns being one of them. One of the most impactful things that probably resulted in a lot of students falling behind in education was the closing of schools completely and rapid switch to remote work, or not remote work. Well, yeah, remote work, but also remote schooling.
Especially for the population of students that they had no preparation for this, and they were accustomed to, when you say the word school or education, they immediately, their mind goes to, I wake up, I get on a bus, I go here, I do this, I do that, very structured, and then immediately it was just, school was closed as if it had snowed or there was bad weather, and they just never went back for like 2 years. And I know in my household, personally, I had some children that were already homeschooled, so they were quite accustomed to independent or online learning. And then we had other children that attended public school, and these are very capable, very, very smart children that did very well in school. And I'm telling you that, I'll just say it, they bombed with the distance learning, because to them it wasn't school, it didn't feel like school, and their education just truly suffered, because it wasn't that they weren't being presented with the same sort of materials that they would have been presented with in a classroom setting. I'm fairly certain that the actual education coming from the instructors was on par, but it wasn't. They weren't accustomed to the learning model, and they were not receptive to it.
Yeah, and keep in mind, that's not just for elementary or middle school kids. That's also high school kids, college kids. Right. I actually was reading
and I think high school, especially, because a lot of, I know a lot of younger children, parents had to make arrangements for someone to supervise their distance learning. You had someone stay home with them, or a babysitter or something. But I think a lot of high school kids were old enough that they were home by themselves. Their parents still had to go to work if they were an essential employee, or things like that. And I think for the high school kids, it was just kind of like, the Wild West. Like there was, they didn't understand why, like, okay, yeah, I can keep this little video class up in the corner, but I'm getting on social media, and nobody knows the difference, and why not? Like I think the high school kids particularly probably really suffered. And things that they had been looking forward to, like proms and homecomings and things like that, that we as a society often consider to be very formative milestone experiences. Those were just kind of like yanked away with no alternative or any other sort of thing. And they really missed those experiences. They went to school for however many years thinking like, oh, I'm going to pick my prom dress and I'm going to have the best time, and then I'm going to walk across the stage and in my cap and gown. And, this is what they were told for years and years. And then all of a sudden it just didn't happen. And I think that probably was very mentally taxing.
Right. Well, and with no end in sight. And that was the extremely mentally taxing part, So, initially, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, weren't we initially told 2 weeks? That's all we have to shut everything down for, just 2 weeks.
I believe so. I believe it was just some weeks. And I recall that period not because of the distance learning, but because that was actually, I had just gotten married. We had just gotten married. And I needed to go to the Social Security Administration to change my name. I needed to go get a new driver's license and all of these things. And I remember just all of a sudden, like, they were like, oh yeah, it's closed for a few weeks. So I was like, okay. And then it took a week turned into a year. And I was like, what name am I supposed to put on my taxes? Like, I don't know what to like it. So I imagine like, I'm a grown adult, you know what I mean? Like, I can't even imagine. And then also there were a lot of people with court cases that needed to be adjudicated. You had people in the middle of custody or divorce. You had people with a traffic ticket hanging over their head and things like that. And so, people thought that, this would only be a few weeks and then it'll get taken care of. And we wound up, that is not at all how it went. Like, not at all. It turned into years, literally years where, there was nothing you could do about it.
Yeah. And unfortunately, and they're still conducting studies and looking at the data. And, fortunately, there was, one country that they didn't implement any of these crazy lockdowns, and that was Sweden. And they're comparing the data in Sweden, comparing it to the United States and other countries that did the lockdowns. And they're starting to find that, yes, the lockdowns did more harm than good. But anyone who questioned it was labeled a conspiracy theorist, was chastised, outed from whatever organization they were in, if they were a educational professional or medical professional. And it's very sad to see how quickly anyone with a different opinion from the politically mandated opinion found themselves out in the cold. But unfortunately, the lockdowns is not where this stops. Now, and actually, if we take a look back, 2 weeks before the lockdowns, then you'll know that, and I don't have the exact date, but there was, some people, myself included, we started wearing respirator masks because we were aware that COVID-19 was a respiratory virus. And we really didn't want to catch that virus. And the government issued statements saying that you do not need to wear a mask, do not wear a mask, that it will actually increase your chances of getting COVID.
Yeah, we actually, before, I believe it was actually in the fall, before they even announced, like, I don't know the proper way to say it, but before we knew COVID was a thing, okay? Like, my entire family was sick from, like, Halloween to Christmas. Like, there was no cold medicine in any of the stores. But we had a child that needed to go to the emergency room for an injury. And I put a mask on because, like, they have them sitting on the counter, and I hate, like, any kind of, like, waiting room situation. And it's a running joke in my family. Like, my family's like, where do you think that you're, like, in Beijing? What are you doing with a mask? And I'm like, look at all these people, like, sniffling and snarfling. I don't want to come out. So, like, it wasn't unusual for me personally to want to wear a mask when there were sick people everywhere. I don't want to get it, and I also don't want to spread it. So, like, to me, it wasn't like an oppressive thing at first. It was just kind of like we were told, like, you don't need that. It's not going to work. Like, whatever this is, like, you're probably just going to make it worse. And I was like, okay. But then a few weeks later, it was, you are not allowed to enter a public place without one. So I was like, okay, like, just right. I'm trying my best to comply. I'm doing my best. And we kept hearing about the science, but I was like, okay, but I would like to see it again. Choices. Yes, we were given choices, but I don't feel that, like, I personally felt in a lot of these situations, like, where do I get the data to make my choice? Like, I don't just want to be told that, like, this science exists and it says this. Like, where can I see that with my own eyeballs and see if that tracks in my brain? You know what I'm saying? Like,
well, and
I think everyone did their best to do as they were asked and to be compliant and to make sure that they were not becoming part of the problem, especially intentionally or just rebelliously. Like, I didn't know anyone that was like, I'm not doing that. I don't care about other people. Everybody that I know was like, oh my goodness, like, okay, so what are we supposed to do? How do we keep ourselves and everyone else safe? Like, if you say this is what I need to do, I'm happy to do that. Like, we weren't like, I think that people just wanted the why. You know what I mean? Like, okay, so can you show me how this is helping, or can you show me that this is going to keep us safe, or can you show me that this is not counterproductive? I think that's all people were asking is, can I see whatever it is that you're seeing before you tell us to do these things?
Yeah, and in a 2 to 4 week period between them telling us do not wear masks, it increases your chance of catching COVID, and the following mandate that said you must wear a mask to be anywhere in public, including outdoors, by the way.
Right.
They
And
they
am I
knew it.
correct?
The science didn't change during that time. The science didn't change.
I'm trying to remember, but weren't we told at first that it was not airborne,
Correct.
and that you got it from touching things like gas pumps or the pin pad at the grocery store, things like that, physical contact, and that it wasn't airborne? That's kind of what I remember for the first few weeks.
Yes, but don't wear gloves. Just wash your hands. Don't wear gloves.
Right. And I also remember just parking lots full of just gloves and masks and things like that. And I just remember being okay, well, if these are covered in whatever germ this is a bad time. Whose job is it to pick this crap up? Because nobody is, it's just, do I pick it up? Am I going to get sick? Am I supposed to do that? Where do I throw it away? Is this biohazard? What are we dealing with here? And I think that was the scary thing for a lot of people, is that as we could see that this was not a 2-week thing, and this was not going to be quick, and we just watched the world shut down around us, we were just kind of okay, well, how do we are not equipped for a quick change of lifestyle in our society. I just don't feel like we are.
No.
We are very accustomed to doing things the way that we do them. We're a very regimental society. No matter what your day looks like, that's what most of your days tend to look like for most Americans. So
yeah. Now, so now, once they then backtracked on that, which, by the way, now that we're well beyond the period, they have been, I have seen places where they admitted no, they wanted to make sure that first responders and doctors and hospitals got priority for the inventory. Well, just tell us that, because I believe that most people have good intentions. Most people care about others. For myself, I did not go out and buy masks. I already had them on stock.
Right.
I didn't go out and buy gloves.
Right.
I already had them in stock. Now, is that because I'm a crazy paranoid person? No. You know why I had masks in stock? Because I was just a little bit before that, I was in the process of cleaning out a shed that had been unattended for close to a decade, and it had inside of it a significant amount of cat feces. So I purchased specifically masks that were designed to filter out bacterial and viral airborne particles. Well, guess what? Those sure came in handy. So thank God for that.
I will never forget. Anyone that has been to my house or met my husband knows that he is a, let's just say, a collector of the most random things you've ever seen. And I will never forget, I couldn't find hand sanitizer anywhere. Because there were, most people, like you said, most people were kind and not predatory, but there literally were people that would go to Dollar Tree and buy all the hand sanitizer and sell it for $5 a bottle on Facebook. Let's be real. People did that. That happened. And so I couldn't find hand sanitizer anywhere. And we were being told that you need to, because contact. And I will never forget, my husband was like, I have a dispenser. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he went to the shed, and for whatever reason, he just happened to have a giant, industrial hand sanitizer dispenser you would find in a public restroom. And that's what we used, because, people were forced to try to find other sources for products, because you could not find them locally. And it did not seem like they were coming back in stock anytime soon. And this was before they put purchase limits on things, because, again, we were told it would be a few weeks. So I'm sure, that the stores were not anticipating that, okay, some jerk just bought all of the hand sanitizer, but don't worry, another truck is coming, is what I'm sure that most retailers assumed.
And I'm not going to lie, I was totally expecting you to say that he went out to the shed and distilled a batch of moonshine and turned it into hand sanitizer. I was totally expecting that.
No, because liquor stores were still essential businesses, so we didn't have to worry about that. We were good. We were good on the booze.
So yeah, so, but the lockdowns themselves, and so we talked about the educational aspect. Let's talk about the business aspect for a minute. That was also devastating to small businesses. Most of the large businesses in the state, the big box stores, the grocery stores, the liquor stores, they were all deemed essential businesses. They all stayed open. But the small mom and pop shops, a lot of them, if they were specialty stores, like a convenience store or something, well, they either had to completely close, especially restaurants. Restaurants completely closed. Or, in the case of some of the stores, like the convenience stores that sold food, they would have to limit how many people could be inside the store at one time. And it was additionally a ridiculously large amount. I'm sorry, ridiculously small amount. Like 3 people in the store allowed at a time, something like that.
Yeah. And I don't think, like, maybe to this day, people don't even realize, like, when they said that whenever they were deciding, like, if a business was essential or not, I don't think people realized that, like, the math on that was not necessarily, like, it did not mean that, like, Marylanders or people in any state that had these sort of protocols could not live without whatever was being sold at that location. A lot of times, essential meant, like, especially when it comes to, like you said, alcohol, tobacco, things like that, the state, the taxes on those items help fund the state of Maryland. And so a lot of times, like, I know people didn't understand, like, okay, how is, the hair salon, how can I not go get a haircut, but I can go buy alcohol or cigarettes or whatever? And the reason is because those items are taxed, generating, extra revenue for the state, in addition to the regular sales tax. They're taxed at a higher rate in many occasions. And I don't think that people realize that, like, essential, like, that was all calculated. They didn't really consider essential for whom or for what was not information that was readily available. Like, you really had to dig to be like, okay, again, choices. How are they deciding what is essential and what is not? And we did not have that information readily provided to us. Like, they didn't say, okay, tomorrow when you wake up, half of your town is going to be closed. Here is how we decided what is staying open and what isn't. You know what I mean? Like, they didn't give us that information.
Yeah. And also too, so for some businesses, it was their absolute lifeblood was, staying open, because especially like the family owned restaurants. Okay. For them, those restaurants are their only source of income, is that restaurant. Now, not only do you have the problem of you're not making any income, so you can't, you can't go out and buy essentials. Now you've got rent that still needs paid. Okay. And now you've also got a lot of food. Okay. You're not going to go hungry if you own a restaurant, but you might if you worked at one. But you've got a lot of food that has a very limited shelf life, because most restaurants use fresh ingredients and they have it stocked up for this many days worth of stuff. And now you have to find a way to unload that fresh food, or you're going to lose all of that investment. And it just compounded effect. And many small businesses, many restaurants especially, did not reopen after the lockdown.
Well, and restaurants and like you said, the smaller, like independently owned, the one-off restaurants, we're not talking chain restaurants, we're talking small businesses. They are the ones that are most likely to use local, small, independent suppliers. So not only were the restaurants and businesses like that completely buggered, but also their supplier, like, there was no one left to buy the items from the suppliers. So they were not in a good place either. And it was just kind of like, if you were not a giant regional or national retailer or a business that was deemed essential, you just woke up one day and had no income, but you still had all of your expenses.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So, and it really, it devastated a lot of people, and even some of the ones that,
like you said, again, choices. Right. People had to choose should I continue to try to float this? And again, we were not given any kind of timetable. So yes, people had a choice, but they did not really necessarily have adequate data to make a good choice. We all just had to kind of take our best guess. Some people decided to close immediately and cut their losses. Some people chose to try to wait it out because we were told it would only be a few weeks. And so, yes, everybody had a choice to make, but we didn't really have easy access to the information to make an informed decision. And when you are talking about your livelihood, that is a very terrifying thing, that you're just expected to decide, like, here's choice A and choice B, and just pick one, and sorry for you. And that's just terrible. Like, it's just terrible. I don't know what else to say about it. It's just a horrifying position to be in.
Well, and and this continued for well over a year. And
yes,
well, technically about a year and a half, almost 2 years. And and you mentioned informed decisions, and I'm glad you did, because that then brings me to the next part. So, of course, all right, at some point
to me,
during
that's what the entire thing comes down to. Yeah. Everybody, kind of looks back at the pandemic, and there are people that, whether it is physical injury or they wound up like losing everything, the roof over their head, financial ruination, anything like that. Those people, when they speak up, they're told that you had a choice. And that is right. The point of this segment this evening is exactly what we're doing right now. Yes, everyone absolutely had a choice. No one was forced to do anything, but we need to talk about what those choices looked like at the time that we were expected to make them. Now we have data to look back, and it's very easy to say, like, well, geez, like, how did you think you were going to keep a restaurant going with nobody in it for 2 years? Because now we know that, but you have to put yourself in that person's shoes at the time. They did not have that information. They did not have that data. They did not have those projections. They were expected to make informed decisions with no information, which is counterintuitive. Like, that's an oxymoron. You can't make an informed decision without information. And it's time to recognize that is what a lot of people were expected to do. And so when they are telling us that they got hurt or they got screwed, then we need to say, I'm so sorry that happened to you. Not, well, you had a choice and you made the wrong one. That is unfair to treat people that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, let's talk through how the pandemic progressed. State is completely shut down almost, other than the people who were lucky enough to be in a job that was considered essential. Now, fortunately, there was some unemployment assistance offered. But, at the same time, that let's be honest, unemployment is only intended to be temporary, and you still need to try to figure out what you're going to do long term. But then,
and also the state of Maryland during that time suffered two, I believe, major cyber attacks. So there was extra like EBT assistance, and there was unemployment and things like that. Those funds were stolen for upwards of 1 million people that were relying on that. Like, they were to get X amount of dollars on their card on this day. Somebody stole that funding, and it was not immediately replaced. So again, people were being told, like, well, you're collecting unemployment, you've got food assistance. What is the problem? Not understanding that millions of people, yes, on paper, they were receiving those funds, but they did not actually receive those funds. Those funds were stolen. And this is a matter of public record. All you have to do is Google, like, Maryland unemployment hack or whatever you want. That happened. And those funds were not immediately replaced. Because the federal assistance did not come in until much later. So we had people that went weeks and weeks, if not months, that did not have access to the funding that they were told they were eligible to receive. And so, on paper, you should easily be able to afford groceries and pay your electric bill or whatever. But that money did not come for those people.
Yeah. So now, of course, then as it progressed, then we finally got a bunch of options for testing, which of course were limited in the very start. Governor Hogan managed to negotiate a deal with a South Korean company for some test kits for the virus. We're not going to get into that entire story, but needless to say, found out afterwards that every single one of those test kits were defective. So, okay, great, wonderful. So government got duped on that apparently. But then we finally get to the part where everybody thinks there's a light at the end of the tunnel and don't realize it's an oncoming train. And that's, we now have a vaccine. And in fact, they released multiple vaccines, all under emergency authorization. And then
before we get into the vaccines, can I say one more thing about just the financial part? Okay, so another thing, people might be aware that a lot of the small businesses that did close, there was the option for a like a loan, like a COVID relief loan. And again, we know after the pandemic that most of those loans were forgiven.
Yeah.
But at the time, it was, we did not know that was going to happen. So again, even if people were taking, availing themselves of any of these assistance programs, whether it be unemployment, EBT, a business loan, anything like that, they were expecting the businesses that availed themselves of the relief that they would have to pay that back. And so I've spoken to people about this before, like, well, so-and-so lost their business. Well, why didn't they just take the money? Well, because they thought that they were going to have a year or so of no business, just racking up more debt, and then a loan on top of that they were told that would need to be paid back within a very short time frame. They did not know that those loans were going to be forgiven. So I just wanted to add that was a difficult choice for people to make. Like, do I go in more debt, or what do I do? So anyway, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just wanted to throw that in there that yes, on paper, everybody was getting money from everything, but we thought that a lot of that was going to have to be paid back or never received it in the first place. So that wasn't very helpful.
Yeah.
Just to have on paper that this is available and there's help. And then, in all actuality, a lot of people that qualified for whatever kind of help it was did not receive it in a timely fashion before it was too late for them to have to drastically change their lives in some way.
Yeah. And so but, then, as were things going, further along, we've got the vaccine. And now that's where things get really sad for some of the businesses, for some people, because the vaccine had a lot more side effects than we were led to believe. And this is not a conspiracy theory, this is fact. If you look in the VAERS data, which is the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, which was created by, I believe, the Department of Health and Human Services. Yes, Department of Health and Human Services. There have been, since the COVID vaccine was released, there are reports of 1,630,913 vaccine adverse events. 1,630,913 events. The scary part about that is that VAERS is estimated that only about 1% of people actually report adverse events with VAERS. So if that's the case, then we're looking at 100 million people who had adverse events. Well, now, granted, some of those events could be considered minor, such as their arm hurt for 24 hours. That's still technically an adverse event. So, but since we're focusing strictly on Maryland, to put in perspective the scope of these events, I actually pulled the Maryland numbers. And through February 23rd, 2024, there were a total, and this is just for COVID vaccine, a total of 17,831 adverse events reported in the state of Maryland. Of those adverse events,
I'm sorry, are those numbers like from the Department of Human Services and Health or whatever? Is that the same thing as the data that the CDC is now collecting about people that had adverse reaction? Like, it's one and the same? Okay, I was just curious. Yeah. So it doesn't really matter to which avenue you use to report it. It all goes to the same study. Okay, thank you for clarifying. I personally wasn't sure, so. Okay.
Yeah, the only exception would be if it's going to a specific focused study, then it's going to be different data for that study. But this is supposed to be the master reporting.
Okay. And that includes, I know there was one of the vaccines got pulled, like halfway through the pandemic. Yeah. Like it was just, you weren't to get that anymore. And then, especially here in Western Maryland, I would like to, remind everyone that maybe doesn't live here, or again, this is fresh in our mind, and it's also very far away, because I think a lot of people just mentally like had to block that out. And I want to talk about that later too. But we are sandwiched between, we're like 10 minutes from both Pennsylvania and West Virginia that had different rules than Maryland did. And so we had people coming here for work or to purchase things or what have you, that were not under the same rules and protocols that Maryland residents were under. I personally know dozens of people that traveled here regularly from like Greencastle, Chambersburg, just places in Pennsylvania, just because their liquor stores weren't open and ours were, like things like that. So, and those people they did not have the same requirements that Maryland residents had. And so I know that was frustrating for a lot of people. You know what I mean? Like, why am I being like, I distinctly remember being told, and not just in Maryland, this was on at least a regional thing, because, I very often am in venues, entertainment venues, things of that nature. And we were literally told that, like, if you ever want to attend a sporting event or a concert or anything like that, if you ever want to go in a nightclub, if you want to have dinner at a restaurant, you are going to have proof that you received one of these vaccines. And so again, choices. Yes, nobody forced anybody to do anything. We all had a choice, but the choice that we were given was basically to stay home for the rest of your life, or you will be required to prove that you received one of these vaccines. So I'm not saying that that's like right or wrong, or that was intentionally deceptive or anything like that. I'm just saying that, again, the point of this, the theme of this is, let's just say in plain English, the choices we were faced with. And that is the choice that we were faced with. Either you want to have a job or you don't want to have a job. You want to go to a football game or you don't want to go to a football game. You know what I mean? Like, that was the choice that we were faced with. If you want to interact with the general public in the state of Maryland, you will be asked to prove that you received one of these approved vaccines.
Yeah.
So that's the choice that we're getting ready to talk about. That's the choice that we were making. Do I get this vaccine so that I can, keep my job, or, like, let's say that you travel for work, or your work is something that my job often finds me at dinners or even at nightclubs or entertainment venues or things like that. Like, if I ever want to see another band play, I'm going to be asked to prove that I got this. It's just like when you drive a car, you are told that you are expected to have proof of a driver's license and insurance. It was the same thing. Yes, nobody is making me drive this car, but I'm going to be expected to supply proof that I'm complying with the law. So it was the same thing. Just like if you get pulled over, you have to show your driver's license, your registration, and insurance. We were told that if we walked into any of these places, we were going to have to prove that we got this vaccine. So that was the choice. Let's talk about it.
So let me run the numbers for you. Out of those 17,831 reports, 1,094 Marylanders were hospitalized by the vaccine. 391 were permanently disabled. 288 had a life-threatening reaction to the vaccine. And an additional 205 died after taking the vaccine. And that's actually in the VAERS data. All right, go off to the Health and Human Services data, pull the data down, look for yourself if you don't believe me. But this was a dangerous vaccine. And
I would like to point out that, like, okay, so people are very used to the potential for side effects, bad reactions, things like that. Anytime you see a commercial for any sort of pharmaceutical treatment, like, there's always that click talking, like, hey, this could cause anything from a headache to you might die, but that only happens in like point whatever % of cases. So people feel like, okay, yeah, there's going to be the chance for side effects with anything. Like, there's a chance you could have a bad reaction to amoxicillin, Tylenol. It happens all the time. Anything that you ingest, even food, you could have a bad reaction. Like, it just happens. But because we did not, like, any drug like that has to go through extensive clinical trials. And so they have that data to give you. Like, whatever percent of patients has a reaction ranging from everything from nausea, diarrhea, suicidal thoughts, like dizziness, tired, anything, like whatever the side effects are, they tell you, but they tell you that that's a very small chance. And just, this is for most people, whatever we're selling is gonna work, and there's a very small chance that you might suffer a side effect that's probably going to be manageable. The marketing for these vaccines did not include that data, and again, not because I think that they were being intentionally deceptive, but because that data did not exist, because we just did not have the clinical trials. We short tracked these because that was trials. the yes.
But they were short tracked, like you said. The clinical trials
were not extensive. They were not. Many of them were not even double blind. They were not independently reviewed in medical journals. Like really anything. Like if I get a prescription for something, I can literally just Google it and see, if it's really as advertised. Like I think that opiates, like especially like oxycodone, are a terrific example of that because it was marketed as non-addictive. But we now know that that was not necessarily the case because it was non-addictive at a very specific dosage for a very small group of people. So I think that might be a way that people can wrap their head around this, is that just like people that got hurt at work or got hurt, playing Frisbee or whatever, and they were prescribed something like that, they were told, this is safe, this is not addictive, you'll be fine. And now years later, here we are, and it is literally an epidemic because for many people, that was not correct information. It was not safe. It was very addictive, and it ruined many lives. People suffered irreparable damage. So I think that is a very good comparison because, yeah, we know that any vaccine could have side effects. But the way that these were marketed was that, like, yeah, we're not even really sure what those are because at the time, they didn't even know about long COVID. They didn't even know. They didn't even know that people were going to lose their ability to taste or smell for 6 months or longer. Like, we didn't know that some people's hair was going to fall out. Like, we did not know any of these things. So I don't think, again, that, like, maybe it's fair to say that they weren't intentionally deceptive or trying to pressure people. Everyone had a choice. But again, we did not have the data. We did not have the data. Like, you can't tell me that those, however many Marylanders you said, when they went to get and I mean, you could get this thing in the parking lot at the outlets from the National Guard and then go get you a pretzel. Like, this was a quick, like, you didn't have, like, you just showed up. You're like, yeah, I need a COVID vaccine, and then I'm going to get a coffee, and then I'm going to get gas, and then I'm going to hit the grocery store because I've been in my house for 6 months. This is great. Like, it was not you didn't have to make an appointment. Like, you could just show up to, like, a random mall and be good to go. Like, it wasn't marketed as a medical decision that you should carefully consider. It was marketed as, if you want to get back to real life and rejoin society, you just need to take 30 seconds out of your day to get this vaccine, and then everybody's going to be fine. That's how it was marketed.
Yeah, and so now let me share with everybody the decision that I was forced to make. So at the time, I was a federal contractor. I'm no longer a federal contractor, by the way. And to be perfectly honest, if I was still a federal contractor, I probably wouldn't feel comfortable even sharing this.
We wouldn't be sharing it because Radio Free would not exist if you were still a federal contractor. So there's that.
Well,
we were literally born of the pandemic and the circumstances surrounding it, and we are just one example of just people had to find a new way to do things.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but I don't think a lot of, I'm just going to say it. I know that sometimes you mention that your vaccine injury still affects your life on social media and stuff. And like, my Facebook is on point, right? Like, my Facebook, often sends me messages like, oh, you behave yourself, so we recommend your stuff to strangers, and, you're making a couple bucks, and this, you're just a lovely Facebook account. And when I see some of the comments that people leave on your stuff, man, like, I'm telling you, like, I never want to pop off so hard, even though, like, So
Yeah.
I'm hoping that people really, like, if you're listening to this, please really pay attention, because I'm hoping that because you and I are good friends and I know the decision that you had to make and the data that you had to make it with, maybe I understand a little better why this pisses you off so bad and what actually happened to you than the random person on Facebook. So please, if you're listening to this, really pay attention to what he's about to say, because not only DJ Warbuckler, but many, many other people were in a similar position. And if people that got these vaccines and everything was fine and they had not one side effect and life, everything was fine, like nothing ever happened. If they are allowed to say, like, well, not allowed to say, but if they are comfortable to say, man, I got it and nothing happened, then people that had a different experience should be just as comfortable that they are not going to be bullied or chastised or accused of lying or anything like that from people that don't know what happened to this person and the choice that they did have to make. So just this isn't coming from Buckler, like he's about to tell you his wild story and what happened, but I'm just asking you personally. I'm one of those people that did not have this experience the same as him, and I'll explain why after he finishes, but just let's listen to someone that had a real bad time. And then maybe next time we see someone saying like that they're suffering, remember that we need to understand that someone that is saying that they're suffering, they might not be spilling like all the nobody wants to seem like a crybaby and go into the whole ordeal every time they mention something. So sometimes, people, and this is common with any kind of injury or trauma, like people don't want to tell every single person the entire story from jump to finish. People just want to say like, I'm having a bad day because I have this problem, and not be bullied or accused of lying. So please, just, if somebody's saying that something happened to them, something traumatic or something that injured them, please just know in the back of your head that most people would not just make something like that up, and that there must be more to it. And if you're not believing it, just ask the person, like, hey, I'm struggling to understand and I'm struggling to believe this. Can you give me some more information? Can you tell me what happened to you? And then make whatever comment you're going to make. Then believe them or not. But again, you have a choice. This is about choices. So we're going to talk about how we treat people now. And so please make the choice that if you're not exactly understanding or believing somebody's truth, then ask them to explain more to you. Ask them for more information. Ask them if they're comfortable sharing before you make a judgment. Don't just judge because you don't understand. Like, assume that there's more to the story and ask for that information. So anyway, tell your horrible story, and let's get it out.
Yeah. So
unfortunately, that's all the time that we have for tonight. But look for more information in part 2 of this special series focusing on the coronavirus pandemic.
But also that's it for tonight's newscap. So on behalf of BB and myself and all the Radio Free Hub City family, thank you for listening, and we hope that you'll join us next time. And don't forget to visit our website for more local and national news at radiofreehubcity.com.